My grandma. I was a young man when I went to visit my grandma one cold winter morning. The sky was gray, and the trees had no leaves. I wore my warm coat and walked through the quiet street. Her small house stood at the end, just like always. I knocked on the door, and she opened it slowly. Her face looked older, but her eyes were still kind. She gave me a soft smile and said, "Come in, my boy." The house smelled like tea and old books. It was warm inside, and everything looked the same. I saw her favorite chair by the window. I saw the clock on the wall ticking slowly, tick-tock, tick-tock. She walked to the kitchen and made tea. I sat at the table where I used to sit as a child. The chair creaked under me, but it felt like home. Grandma placed a cup of tea in front of me. She sat down across from me and looked at me quietly. We didn't talk at first. We just sipped our tea and listened to the clock. The room was calm and still. Her hand shook a little when she held her cup. Her back was a bit bent, and she moved slower than before, but she was still strong in her own way. I looked around the room and saw old pictures on the wall. There were photos of her children and grandchildren. Some were old and black and white. One picture was of me when I was small. I smiled when I saw it. The books on the shelf were still there. Nothing had changed, but it felt different now. I was older, and so was she. After a while, Grandma looked at me and spoke. Her voice was soft and slow. She said, "I want to talk to you." I put down my cup and listened. She looked out the window for a moment, then she said, "Hi." I was surprised. I never thought of Grandma as someone who was afraid. She was always calm and smiling when I was a boy. She said, "I am afraid of being alone. I think about it sometimes late at night." Her eyes looked far away. "See, one day you might all forget me," she said. "You have busy lives. You have work, family, everything." Her hands were still, and her voice was quiet. "I worry I will be here waiting, and no one will come." My heart felt heavy. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but my mouth stayed closed. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Her skin was cold, but she didn't move away. She looked at me and gave a small smile. I held her hand and nodded. I wanted her to know I was there. I wanted her to feel loved. That visit changed something in me. I never saw Grandma the same way again. She was more than sweet tea and warm hugs. She had deep feelings, quiet fears, and a soft heart. I still remember that day clearly, the tea, the silence, her words. They stayed with me, and I promised myself that I would never let her feel forgotten. After that day, I started to visit Grandma more often. I didn't wait for special days or holidays. I would go on quiet afternoons or early mornings. Sometimes I brought flowers, sometimes just a smile. She always welcomed me with the same warm eyes. Her hugs were soft, and her hands were still a little cold, but her heart always felt warm. It felt good to sit with her, even in silence. We didn't talk about big things every time. Sometimes we talked about the weather or the neighbor's cat. Sometimes we said nothing and just listened to the wind outside. The house was always quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of something gentle. I think Grandma liked those visits. I could see it in her face. Her smile was small but real. One afternoon, she asked me to help her clean the attic. I had never been up there before. The stairs were narrow, and the air smelled old. Boxes were stacked in corners, full of old things. She pointed to a box and said, "That one is full of memories." I opened it slowly and saw books, letters, and photos. It was like stepping into the past. There was a photo of Grandma when she was young. She was standing by a tree, smiling in the sun. She looked strong and happy. I showed it to her, and she laughed. "That was long ago," she said. Her voice was light, but her eyes were full of thought. I asked her where it was taken, and she told me a story about that day. It was a good story. She talked about her childhood, her friends, and her dreams. I never knew much about her young life. She said she wanted to be a teacher once. She said she loved reading books and helping children, but life was different back then. Her family didn't have much money. She had to work in the fields instead. Still, she smiled as she told the story. I listened to every word. I didn't want to miss anything. I saw her not just as my grandma, but as a girl with hopes and plans. I saw her life in a new way. She was full of stories that no one asked to hear, and now I was hearing them. I felt lucky. I felt close to her in a way I had never felt before. We sat on the floor of the attic for a long time. Dust filled the air, and the light came in through a small window. Grandma kept talking, and I kept listening. Her voice was soft, but it carried years of life inside it. Every photo, every letter, every object had a story. I didn't want that day to end. It felt like time had stopped. When we came back down, she looked tired but happy. I helped her sit down, and she smiled at me. "Thank you for listening," she said. I nodded. I didn't need to say much. That day in the attic was special. I learned more about her in one afternoon than I had in many years, and I knew this was just the beginning of more stories to come. In the weeks that followed, I started asking Grandma more questions. I wanted to hear her stories, the ones no one ever asked about. She was quiet at first, but then she began to open up. She told me about the house she grew up in, the games she played as a child, and the songs she sang with her sisters. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. I could see the girl she used to be in the way her eyes lit up. One day, she told me about a boy she once loved. It was before she met my grandfather. She said they used to walk near the river and talk about the future. He went away to work in another city and never came back. She never saw him again. Her voice was calm, but I could feel the sadness. It was a quiet kind of pain that had stayed inside her heart for many years. Then she told me about the war. She was still very young when it happened. She said everything changed during that time. People lost their homes, and families were torn apart. She had to be strong even when she was scared. Her mother cried often, and her father left to fight. She had to take care of her younger brothers. Life became hard, and the happy songs stopped for a while. But she didn't just tell sad stories. She also told me about moments of joy. She remembered dancing in the rain with her friends. She laughed when she talked about the time she fell into a pond while trying to catch a frog. Her laugh was soft but full of life. I loved hearing these parts. They made me see her not just as someone old, but as someone who had lived. Each story she told was like a small window into her past. I felt like I was traveling through time with her. I began to understand her more, and I began to understand life more. She taught me things without trying to teach. She showed me that people carry so much inside: memories, pain, dreams, love, and sometimes they just need someone to listen. Sometimes she would stop talking and just look out the window. She said the trees reminded her of the ones near her childhood home. She said the sound of wind made her think of her mother singing. These small things brought back big memories. I listened carefully, even to the silence. It said just as much as the words. We made a new habit together. Every week, I brought an old photo from the attic. She would hold it and smile. Then she would tell me the story behind it. Some stories were short, some were long, but all of them were full of feeling. I wrote some of them down in a notebook. I wanted to keep them safe, like little pieces of gold. One day, she said something I won't forget. She said, "Thank you for seeing me." I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Many people look at me, but you really see me." That sentence stayed in my heart. I understood what she meant. It was about being noticed, not just being there. And in that moment, I realized how much we all need to be seen. As time went on, Grandma's body became weaker, but her mind stayed strong. She moved slower, and sometimes she forgot where she placed things, but when she told her stories, she was clear and bright. Her eyes shined with each memory. I started visiting her twice a week. I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to hear every part of her life before the stories faded. Her house became a place of learning, not just for her, but for me too. One evening, it was raining hard outside. I sat by the window while Grandma rested in her chair. She began speaking softly. She said, "See, remember another rainy night many years ago?" I looked at her and waited. She said she had been alone in her room that night, just like now. Her children had moved out. Her husband had passed away. The house was quiet, just like tonight. She said that night she cried for the first time in a long time, not because of pain, but because of silence. She said the silence felt like a heavy blanket. I didn't know what to do with it. She missed the sound of laughter, the footsteps of children, the voice of her husband calling her name. That night, she felt small, like a forgotten page in a book. I listened without saying a word. Then she smiled gently and said, "But silence also teaches you things." She said it helped her listen to her own heart. She learned to enjoy her own company. She began to write letters to her old friends. She started reading new books and planting flowers in the garden. She said, "At first, I feared being alone, but later I found peace in it." Her words stayed in my mind long after I left that day. One afternoon, I asked her what made her feel happy now. She thought for a moment and said, "Small things, a warm cup of tea, a bird singing outside the window, a letter from a friend, or your visit. I don't need big things anymore." She said, "Joy hides in little moments." I wrote those words down. I didn't want to forget. It was a lesson I had never learned before. We began doing small things together. Sometimes we made soup. Sometimes we listened to old music. Sometimes we just sat with our eyes closed and enjoyed the quiet. Those moments felt deep and real. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about work. I was just there with her, and that felt right. It felt like I was finally living in the present. Grandma once said, "When you grow old, people talk less to you. They think you have nothing new to say." But she had so much to say, so much to give. I realized many people missed the chance to learn from those who came before them, but I didn't want to be one of them. I wanted to remember everything. I wanted her words to live on, even after she was gone. One day, she handed me a small box. Inside were letters she had written over the years, letters to her children, her husband, her own mother. "I don't know if anyone will read them," she said. I promised her I would, and I did. That night, I read each letter. Some made me smile, some made me cry, but all of them made me feel close to her more than ever before. A few weeks later, I went to visit Grandma again. She was sitting by the window, looking at the sky. Her hands were resting in her lap, and she looked quiet, almost sleepy. I said hello, and she smiled at me. She didn't speak right away, so I sat beside her. The house was very still. After a few minutes, she said, "I had a dream last night." Her voice was soft and slow. She told me the dream was about her old home. She saw her sister in the dream. They were playing in a green field, running and laughing. The sun was shining, and the wind felt warm. It was like I was really there, she said. She smiled, but her eyes were full of memories. She said she missed those days. She missed her sister's voice and the smell of the trees. Then she turned to me and said, "I think my time is getting short." I felt a tight feeling in my chest, but she didn't look afraid. Her face was calm, and her eyes were clear. "I'm not sad," she said. "I just wonder if I did enough, if I gave enough love." I held her hand and told her yes. I told her she gave more than enough. Her smile was small but strong. After I left her house that day, I felt quiet inside. I didn't play music in the car. I didn't call anyone. I just thought about her words. I thought about how much she had seen in her life. I remembered the stories she told me, the way she laughed, the way she looked out the window. I didn't want to forget any of it, not even one moment. That night, I opened my notebook and began to write. I wrote everything I could remember, every story, every word, every look. I didn't want the memories to fade. I wanted them to stay alive, even if she was gone one day. I wanted to carry her with me, not just in photos, but in my heart. Her voice stayed in my mind as I wrote. A few days later, I went to see Grandma again. This time, she looked more tired than before. Her voice was softer, and she moved more slowly. But when she saw me, her face lit up. She reached out and took my hand. "I'm glad you're here," she said. We didn't talk much at first. We just sat together in silence. Sometimes being there was enough. Words were not always needed. She asked me to open a drawer near her bed. Inside were some small things, an old photo, a broken watch, a letter, and a necklace. She said each one had a story. I picked up the photo. It was her and my grandfather. She told me about the day it was taken. "It was simple," she said, "but I was happy. He always made me feel safe." I showed her the broken watch. She smiled. "That was your grandfather's," she said. "She wore it every day. She told me he once fixed it with a paperclip when it stopped working." She laughed as she remembered. "He wasn't perfect, but he tried," she said. I could feel the love in her words. Even small things held big memories. Next, I found the letter. It was yellow and old. She said it was from her mother. "She wrote it when I moved away," she said. I cried when I read it. She didn't read the letter out loud. She just held it close to her heart. "It still brings me comfort," she whispered. I could see how much she missed her mother, even after all these years. The last thing I picked up was the necklace. It was simple, with a small heart pendant. "It was a gift from my daughter," she said. "She gave it to me on my birthday." She held it in her hand and smiled. "I wear it when I feel alone," she said. "It reminds me that I am loved." I told her she was never alone, and she nodded slowly. That night, when I went home, I thought about all the things in that drawer. They were just small objects, but each one carried a piece of her life. I realized that memories are not always big moments. Sometimes they live in the smallest things. I felt thankful for every story, every visit, every minute spent with her. I knew I would carry them with me forever. I hope this session was helpful. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more such interesting stories. Take care, everyone.